In this video, we'll be going over the best monsters in the game that have exactly 3000 attack, which is kind of the upper threshold for main deck monsters to reach. If a monster goes above 3000, it's usually because that's supposed to be a benefit of the card. In today's video is brought to you by Squarespace, which allows making your own websites a breeze. And at number 10, we have Chaos Dragon Levianeer. This is a level 8 monster with 3000 attack and no defense, and has the effect where it can be special summoned from your hand by banishing a combination of light and dark monsters from your graveyard. And depending on the kinds of monsters you banish, you get to activate one of its 3 effects, all of which are good, and that's kind of why this card sees tons of competitive play and is basically the face of Chaos decks now. As if you only banish light monsters, you get to special summon one monster from your graveyard in defense position. If you only banish dark monsters for its summon, you get to shuffle one random card from your opponent's hand back into their deck, which is a super good effect to use on your first turn. And if you bring it out with any combination of light and dark monsters combined, you get to destroy up to 2 cards in the field without targeting either of them. And this card has a hard once per turn on using any of its effects, which is pretty understandable seeing as it's not that hard to bring out. Now, what's probably so good about this card in relation to all the other Chaos monsters, like Blackluster Soldier and Void of the Beginning, which is also another good Chaos monster, is how versatile its effect really is. If you bring out this card on your first turn, it has an excellent hand sniping effect. If you bring it out late game, it has an excellent destruction effect. And it can also be used to further combo plays by special summoning any monster from your graveyard. With all 3 of its effects being good, it's no wonder this card is included in pretty much any deck that runs light or dark monsters if they can fit it in. And at number 9, we have Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon. This is a Synchro monster which requires a non-tuner Synchro monster as one of its materials, so it's kind of hard to bring out, but it has an excellent effect if it's able to hit the field, where once per turn you can just negate one monster effect and then destroy that card, then gain attack equal to that monster's attack for the rest of the turn. And since most modern meta decks are very monster effect reliant, the ability to negate monster effects is probably the most valuable effect you can negate if you have to pick one of the 3 types of cards. And this one does it in all of the best ways. Negates the effect, destroys the card, and has a third benefit on top of that. It also has another more niche effect, where if it battles a monster that's level 5 or higher, it basically has a built-in honest effect, where it gains attack equal to your opponent's attack during the damage calculation. So if your opponent is playing Synchro monsters or high level monsters for some reason, Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon can just beat over any of them no problem. But really, it's that first effect that's the reason this card sees the most amount of play, and it's partly thanks to the Wind Witch engine, which is able to bring out this card pretty easily. As the Wind Witches have this combo, which starts with Ice Spell, where if you control no monsters, you can just special summon this card from the hand, then special summon Wind Witch Glass Spell from your deck, which will allow you to add Wind Witch Snowbell to your hand, which will then special summon itself. So with a single Wind Witch Ice Spell in your hand, you can get 3 cards on the field without using your normal summon. Then you can use Ice Spell and Glass Spell to go into Wind Witch Winterbell, who can then be used with the Wind Witch Snowbell to go into Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon, since there is a drawback to gaining all that advantage with one card, and that's that you can't summon other monsters from your extra deck except level 5 or higher wind monsters, which Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon is. And because of this Wind Witch engine, basically any deck with room for these cards can get out a Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon with 1 card from their hand without using their normal summon, at the cost of locking them out of the extra deck for the rest of the turn, which is actually incredibly good. And there's also the fact that it's a level 8 dragon monster, so if you use Ultimate to Zulkin to cheat Synchro monsters out of the extra deck, this is definitely the best card to cheat out first. Although when it comes to cheating out the absolute best Dragon Synchro monster, you can't really beat Hot Red Dragon Archfiend Abyss, but that card has 3200 attack, so it doesn't make this list. And of course there are better Synchro Dragon monsters in the game, except none of those can be cheated out of the extra deck. Generally, they all have an extra clause which restricts how they can be summoned. I only mention these 2 because they don't have that clause and can be cheated out of the extra deck, and are good targets to cheat out because of it. And at number 8, we have Borrelsword Dragon. This is probably one of the best Link monsters to be released, with the whole wave of Link monsters being added to the game, because it single-handedly gives pretty much every deck the option to OTK your opponent. This is a Link 4 monster which requires 3+ effect monsters as materials, which makes it almost generic. You just can't use tokens to bring it out easily. And it has the effect where it can't be destroyed by battle. If it attacks a monster, it gains attack equal to half of your opponent's monsters, and then your opponent's monster will lose half of its attack. So, if it attacks into a monster with 3000 attack, for example, it will gain 1500 attack, and your opponent's monster will lose 1500 attack, so they take 3000 points of damage. And where this attack boost comes in very handy, since it does last until the end of the turn, is with its third effect, where, on a quick effect that is spell speed 4 for some reason, you can change one monster on the field to defense position, and if you do, this card can attack twice during this turn. So if it attacks into that 3000 attack monster and gains 1500 attack, it will go up to 4500 attack, where it will then be able to attack one more time. And if it attacks directly, that's 7500 points of damage. Not a full OTK, but enough for basically any other monster on the field dealing damage to easily push past the 8000 points of damage needed. Even if it doesn't gain an attack boost, they can deal 6000 points damage on its own, which is what allows this card to give OTK power to basically anything, since almost any deck can put up that last bit of 2000 points of damage needed. It also allows you to beat over hard to get rid of cards, like Ultimate Falcon, which can generally win you games against certain decks. It also can't be destroyed by battle randomly, which gives it excellent protection if it's also brought out with IP Masquerena, where it basically becomes indestructible. Now, all of its effects are just battle related, and it can only gain the attack boost once per turn. So it can't gain super high attack by attacking over 2 monsters, but this card is so good at battle phase control that it's one of the few monsters with almost purely battle phase effects that sees tons of competitive play because it's just so good at it. And the only reason it's so low on this list is because the top 7 spots are just better at winning the game on their own, or just more broken. And at number 7, we have True King of all Calamities. This card has the effect where it can detach material to declare one attribute, and then it changes all monsters on the field to that attribute. And also, all monsters your opponent controls with that attribute can activate their monster effects or attack. And it can use its effect during your opponent's turn. So just getting this card out can basically shut down your opponent's monsters for a full turn, which is why this card absolutely sees competitive play. It is kind of the reason level 9 monsters have any value, since it just requires any 2 level 9 monsters as materials. It also has an extra effect that synergizes with the True King monsters, which rarely gets used, where you can use your opponent's monsters as materials for your True King monsters to summon themselves. Now, this card also has 3000 attack and defense, so it's generally brought out in defense position so it can't be destroyed by lightning storm. And it's just an excellent shutdown on your opponent, since there is this other little thing about the card where you can change the attribute of your opponent's monsters to whatever you want, but its lockdown effect works on everything your opponent controls of the declared attribute, not just what's on the field. So you could just declare Divine to change all of your opponent's monsters to Divine type for fun, since they still won't be able to activate their on-field effects. But if your opponent has any effects that activate in the hand, they still go off, unless you declare an attribute of that type. So, if you know your opponent's playing a Burning Abyss deck, you can just declare Dark to stop all of their effects from working for a turn, instead of just the effects on the field, which is where the real nastiness of this card comes in. And really, the only reason this card isn't so overpowered is because it requires level 9 monsters, and that's generally a very unpopular level, but does have a decent amount of support where True King Calamities is still played anyway. And at number 6, we have Borreload Savage Dragon. This is a Synchro monster which requires generic materials, so it's easier to bring out than Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon, and has the effect where, when it's summoned, you can equip a link monster from your graveyard to this card, and then it will gain a number of counters equal to that monster's link rating. And it can use these counters to negate your opponent's card effects once per turn. So it's a super good Omni Negate that's very easy to set up, as all you do is basically just get one link monster in the graveyard, and you'll have at least one negate no matter the link rating of that monster. Although obviously you'll want as high of a link rating for more possible negates. And also it gains bonus attack equal to half the attack of the equipped monster, so it has the potential to go to some pretty high levels of attack since it starts off at 3000. Now, because of how easy it is to set up this card Omni Negate and how easy it is to bring out, as it's just generic materials at level 8, it means this card sees all kinds of competitive play. Cards with Omni Negates do very well in competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Generally, they're balanced around the fact that they're hard to bring out. So the ones that are not hard to bring out, like Borreload Savage Dragon, will see tons of play. Although since this card does require setup in a proper Synchro summon, it's actually not a good target to cheat out of the extra deck in the same way as Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon. But it is better if you're able to bring it out normally, since its Omni Negate is better than just a monster negate. And I should probably mention, I kind of assume people know basic Yu-Gi-Oh terms when I'm making these videos, but for those of you who don't know, Omni-Negate just means a card which can negate anything. And at number 5, we have ABC Dragon Buster. This is a fusion monster who has the effect where once per turn you can discard one card to banish one card your opponent controls. And it has another effect where it contributes itself to special summon 3 of your banished Light Machine Union monsters with different names. And both of these effects are quick effects, so you can banish during your opponent's turn to disrupt their plays, and at the first hint of danger, this card contributes itself to bring out the materials used for its summon. Now, both of these effects are good, but that's not the sole reason why this card is currently limited on the ban list. It's definitely because of its summoning requirements, as this is probably the easiest fusion monster to be brought out of the game. You see, normally, fusion monsters require a fusion spell card to bring them out, and rarely do they not require one. And generally, the ones that don't require a fusion spell card and have easy requirements to be brought out see a whole bunch of play. Like in the case of Thunder Dragon Colossus, which basically just requires one monster as its material, and is currently banned for being too easy to be brought out while also having a great lockdown effect. ABC Dragon Buster can be brought out by banishing its materials from your graveyard or on your side of the field. And the key word here is from the graveyard. This basically allows you to fusion summon a monster using cards from your graveyard without needing to use something like Miracle Fusion, which in the past was one of the best fusion spell cards in the game because it allowed you to use materials from your graveyard to bring out a fusion monster. ABC Dragon Buster has a built-in Miracle Fusion to its summoning requirement, which doesn't require you to play an extra spell card in your deck, which is kind of broken. And on top of having a built-in Miracle Fusion, it has 2 good effects on the field, and that's why this card is currently limited, because it has an excellent summoning effect while also having an excellent on-field effect, and a pretty decent defensive option where it can tag out into its materials to be brought out again. If you could play other copies of this card anyway. Limiting this to 1 per deck does a good job of reining in how busted its summoning requirement is, which is why it absolutely deserves a spot on this list with all the other great monsters at 3000 attack. It is only really beaten out by a couple of more broken cards that can kind of win you the game on their own. And today's video is sponsored by Squarespace, a website that lets you build websites for whatever you might need a website for. Now, when I first used this service, I had no experience with making websites at all, and it was super easy, as they let you see the traffic stats of your website in the back end, allow other people to leave comments and likes on pages on the websites if you choose, purchase domains straight from the website, and a whole bunch of other extensions that let you manage inventory, promote products, and the like. So if you're in need of making a professional looking site, you can sign up under my link, squarespace.com/TheDuelLogs, to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. And now, on to the number 4 spot. And at number 4, we have Dragun of Red Eyes. As of making this video, this card is not out in the TCG yet, but I'm gonna kind of ignore that as I make these videos to be kind of timeless in a way, because this card's effect is so good and is seeing so much success in the OCG that it deserves to be talked about at a high spot, since it does have 3000 attack. Now, this card has the effect where once per turn you can just destroy your opponent's monsters up to the number of normal monsters used for its fusion summon. And since its fusion materials are the Dark Magician and Red Eyes Black Dragon, it should have 2 destructions out the gate if brought out with Predator Plant Verte Anaconda, which allows you to send Red Eyes Fusion from your deck to the graveyard to send the other materials from your deck to the graveyard to bring this card out, which allows you to turn any 2 effect monsters on the field into a Dragoon of Red Eyes. In addition to its destruction effect, which also inflicts damage to your opponent equal to their monster's attacks, because, you know, they have to have more good effects on top of that first good effect, it also has a once per turn Omni-Negate with a bonus, where if your opponent activates a card effect, you can discard 1 card to negate the activation, destroy that card, and then give this card a permanent 1000 attack boost, which would immediately make it go up to 4000 attack after a single negate, which is super good. Just being able to destroy a card after negating it is already good. Gaining a permanent 1000 attack boost on top of that is just kind of broken. And this card has one other effect, because you see, this card wasn't good enough being able to destroy monsters and negate card effects. It also cannot be targeted by card effects or destroyed by card effects. It's almost hilarious how many strong effects this one card has, considering the fact that it's really easy to bring out. But it is the fusion combination of 2 of the main characters' iconic cards from the most popular Yu-Gi-Oh anime season, so if they were going to create a broken card with a whole bunch of good effects stacked on top of each other, this one does kind of make sense. And even though this card hasn't been released in the TCG yet, as of making this video anyway, you can definitely see why it had to be included on this list nonetheless. And at number 3, we have Topologic Gumblar Dragon. This card has the effect to discard 4 cards from your opponent's hand before they have a chance to enter their main phase for the first time, which is why this card is currently banned. Now, I should probably expand upon that a little bit more, but that's the TLDR for its ban status. So, Chaos Dragon Levianeer is a great card because it can get rid of 1 card from your opponent's opening hand on your first turn. 3 Tactical Talents is considered kind of broken because it can allow you to get rid of 1 card from your opponent's hand. A Pointer of the Red Lotus is seen tons of competitive play because it allows you to get rid of 1 card from your opponent's hand. Just to give a little bit of context on how good getting rid of 4 cards is. So, how does it accomplish this feat? Well, this easy to bring out card, as it just requires 2+ effect monsters for its materials, so it's a little bit easier to bring out than Borrelsword Dragon, allows you to discard 1 to 2 random cards from your opponent's hand when a monster is summoned to a zone a link monster is pointing to, at the cost of you discarding the same number of cards from your hand. With cards like Divine Sword Phoenix Blade, a card that can add itself back to your hand from the graveyard, this allows you to heavily offset the requirements of activating its effect. And if this card is summoned extra linked, you can discard 2 cards without needing to discard from your own hand. Although both of those effects share a hard once per turn, so you can't do both of them on your same turn to get rid of 6 cards from your opponent's hand. However, if you bring this card out, summon a monster to a zone a link monster is pointing to, then discard in order to discard from your opponent's hand, you can then use the effect of Link Haribo during your opponent's draw phase or standby phase in order to summon it to a zone a link monster points to, in order to activate the effect of this card during your opponent's turn, which will let you discard another 2 cards, which if done on your first turn, makes it so your opponent starts with 4 less cards before their first main phase starts, which is so good it basically wins you the game on its own, unless your opponent was playing a deck that had nothing but graveyard effects and you happen to discard only those cards, which was possible. Although this did require you to discard 4 cards of your own, which was supposed to be how it was balanced out, but with the Goku engine and Divine Sword Phoenix Blade, which fit into the Goku engine very easily, they basically gained advantage every time they used their monsters for link plays, and they could use Phoenix Blade for 2 of those discards, so they only really lost 2 cards in that whole exchange, while also getting a 3000 attack monster on the field. This card was banned pretty quickly after it came out because that was super broken. And at number 2, we have Grinder Golem. This card was kind of a joke before Link Monsters came out, as what it did was it allowed you to special summon this strong 3000 attack monster to your opponent's side of the field, and in exchange you got 2 tokens with 0 attack in face-up attack position on your side of the field, and you lost your normal summon for that turn. In the past, the only good use of this was to use those tokens to attack into Grinder Golem in order to activate things like Inferno Tempest, which allowed you to banish all monsters in your opponent's deck, which sounds a lot better than it actually was. But then, with Link monsters and the ability to convert tokens into extra deck monsters, Grinder Golem became kind of an auto-include staple overnight, because its effect was not once per turn. You see, what you would do was summon Grinder Golem to your opponent's side of the field, then use the 2 tokens for some link plays to eventually end on Akashic Magician, which would then allow you to bounce Grinder Golem back to your hand so that you could bring it out again to use your 2 new tokens to go into Security Dragon, which would allow you to bounce Grinder Golem back to your hand for a second time, which you can then use your 2 new tokens to go into Firewall Dragon to bounce it back for a third time. And then that would bring out 2 new tokens, and then you can just start your combo plays from there. Basically, for giving up your normal summon, you got about 6 cards worth of advantage in Link Arrows, which could be used to further along your plays depending on which deck you were playing. And even though you gave up your normal summon for it, this was probably the best use of your normal summon anyway. It might be one of the single best uses of your normal summon in the game's history, with the amount of advantage you can gain from a single Grinder Golem. You see, when Link Monsters came out, they banned a whole bunch of cards that they thought might be overpowered with the new summoning mechanic, like Level Eater, which definitely would have been overpowered with Links, but they definitely missed a few cards and eventually had to ban them in the early days of Link summoning, and Grinder Golem was one of them, and probably the best of the bunch, which was totally overlooked with how overpowered it was with Links. And at number 1, we have Nibiru, the Primal Being. This card can basically win you the game on its own, and whenever I'm making decks for videos, I have to make a conscious effort not to include Nibiru into my decks, because it's not fun to show duels where you just win with a single card without having to do anything else with your deck. mainly because in those videos I'm trying to show off what the deck can do, and not just show Nibiru winning me games on its own. This card is just that powerful against combo decks, because what it does is, during the main phase, if your opponent summons 5 or more monsters during their turn, you can tribute all face-up monsters in the field in order to give your opponent a token, which has attack and defense equal to the attack and defense of all the tributed monsters. And then you get to special summon Nibiru to your side of the field. So if you wait to use this card at the perfect time against a combo deck, you can just get rid of all of their resources and give them a gigantic token, which you can easily destroy with any kind of monster removal, as it has no protection. And you also get a 3000 attack monster in your side of the field, as Nibiru is kind of a beast on its own. Which allows this card to be quite a problem when it comes to hand traps, as generally all the other hand traps have very low attack or none at all, so they're very vulnerable to cards like Neospacian Aqua Dolphin, which can discard monsters from your opponent's hand if they have less attack than a monster you control. And there's a good chance they won't be able to get Nibiru if they try to do that to you. And it can also dodge Call by the Grave, since it summons itself to the field to activate its effect and doesn't go to the graveyard. And there's lots of meta decks that just simply cannot recover from getting Nibiru'd. This is basically the anti-combo deck card, and it does a great job at breaking combos, where most decks try to get out an Apulsa Bow of the Goddess as soon as possible in their combos, just so they don't have to worry about Nibiru. If a single card can win you games on its own against competitive meta decks, that's a pretty good card, even if it's not good against control decks, which don't summon as much. Although I'd say one of the reasons control decks are a lot better now is because Nibiru exists. It's such a good hand trap that it single-handedly lowered the amount of combo decks being played in the meta, which I think definitely deserves a #1 spot on this list of monsters with 3000 attack, beating out broken cards like Grinder Golem or Dragoon of Red Eyes. Alright, and that's the list. Do you know of any other monsters with 3000 attack that are much better than the ones I talked about on the list? If so, I'd love to hear about them down in the comments, as well as ideas for future videos just like this one. And also, did you know only 40.5% of people who watch these videos are actually subscribed to the channel?